Well, as South Africa wraps up the 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign, we look at the strides that this campaign has made to highlight these challenges. During this campaign, the issue of funding has come into the spotlight as one of the biggest challenges in dealing with GBV and helping victims of gender-based violence. 14 shelters for abused women in the Western Cape are facing imminent closure due to a lack of funding. Let's talk about this then. We are now joined via Zoom by Advocate Brenda Madumise. Thank you very much, Advocate, for joining us here on SABC News, ma'am. Please, will you unmute yourself?
Sorry.
Right.
Good afternoon, Flo, and good afternoon to everyone.
Afternoon, Advocate. All right, so tomorrow marks the end of this campaign, 16 Days of Activism. Has the campaign itself been, adequately or properly supported by those who really should be coming in to support these sort of campaigns?
I mean, Flo, it's 16 days. It's a global campaign. I mean, its impact or lack thereof, it's neither here nor there. It's about what we do on a daily basis in addressing gender-based violence as a national crisis or a pandemic. And I guess when you come to the 16 days, really is to say to the world that you did something as a country, and those who have programs around this time, they can shine the spotlight on what those programs are. But I mean, in a nutshell, really, it's bringing out into the fore if there are any successes that we can talk about, if there are any achievements that we can talk about, if there are any challenges that we are talking about. And one of the challenges that we have just addressed is the lack of funding. Lack of funding is not new for the shelters. It's been something that has been going on for the last 10 years or so. And it tells you that there is no plan on how to address it because we can't talk about it 10 years later and still say the same thing over and over again. Yeah,
Advocate Brenda, you talk about the issue of the day-to-day issues and not just, commemorating the 16 days. Let's talk about this particular challenge then of funding, the lack of funding. Where are the problems exactly? Earlier on, I'd heard, one of the people running some of these shelters that take care of gender-based violence victims saying that they're grappling with the issue of, donor fatigue and, issues of awareness, which one would think would be addressed with, this campaign. Let's talk to that funding issue. What are the problems there?
So funding, let's look at funding in global as a global issue. And when I say global, I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about South Africa. Yeah. We don't have a specific allocation for gender-based violence in the country. Let's start from there, right? So when Treasury makes its own funding and announcements, and it allocates the different resources of money to different government departments, there's no line item that refers to gender-based violence. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing that we are grappling with, because there has not been that, and we have asked for it now. Yeah. Because what tends to happen is once money is allocated to a department, let's take social development, for instance. Social development has got thousands of programs and interventions, and GBV is but one of the many of their interventions and programs. So they don't have a dedicated amount and pool of money to address gender-based violence in its entirety. Same as justice, same as education, same as any other government department. So unless you do that, unless there is a specific allocation towards gender-based violence, that is a line item for each and every department, we are going to have these conversations and you're going to have shelters shutting down their doors because there's no formalized funding for all these shelters that we have in the country.
Well, is there engagement then with relevant ministries, relevant departments when it comes to this particular issue? I'm very disturbed to hear that there isn't a specific allocation or budget that is aimed directly at dealing with GBV. What sort of conversations are you having with those relevant departments and ministries, and are they hearing you out? Because this is an important issue.
So there has been a recognition from, if you followed the discussions that ensued at the second gender-based violence summit. Treasury acknowledged that the funding that is there is not directly targeted towards GBV. So it's money that they allocate. So each department does what it deems fit with the budget. So there's recognition that we have to change. And one of the resolution of the summit was that we need to now put in place a specific gender-based violence budget that will be allocated accordingly. So we'll only see in the new year, and when the Minister of Finance tables his budget, whether all this, what we're spoken about, becomes a reality or not in the new year.
All right. Advocate Brenda, thank you very much for giving us your time. We certainly do appreciate it here on SABC News, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. That is Advocate Brenda Madumise there joining us via Zoom.